Today is March the 2nd, 2019. Today is Saturday. Today, I'm left to my own devices, which is kind of interesting. My wife has gone away with some friends to spend some time together. One of their dear friends is getting ready to move away. And it's interesting. When you're younger, you're thrust into other people's lives because of where you live, and you have to go to school with these people and you interact with these people, and sometimes you get lucky and you come into contact with people who sort of become your forever friends. By that I mean, doesn't matter what you go through in life or where you end up, you still are good friends with those people, and you still communicate with those people, and you still have a kindred bond with those people that you continue. Even though you could spend years where you don't communicate because you are living your life and they're living their lives, but then you come back together and it's like no time has passed, and you get to catch up, and you get to rekindle that friendship and all that stuff. And I sort of have that. We moved to South Carolina when I was 12, and I didn't know how to make friends with people who lived here, because the life that people lived here was different than the life I was used to living. I grew up in West Georgia, where we were from blue-collar families. I spent a lot of time with my mom's family, and my granddad owned a construction business where he did septic tanks and footings, and my grandmother, worked in sewing factories, and we had a farm down the road that we would go and grow vegetables and fruit, and we would fish, and my uncle would hunt, and we watched a little bit of TV once in a while, but it wasn't like recreational like it is today. It wasn't a babysitter like it is today. It was the thing that we turned on, like my grandmother would watch All My Children. So I grew up watching All My Children with her, and it usually involved lunch and a nap right around that time. And then we would get up and we would continue doing stuff, and in the evenings we would turn the TV on after dinner, usually long enough for my papa to watch something, and he would pass out asleep because he was usually at work before the sun came up every day. And this is kind of how we lived our life. My mom was trying to go to school to be a nurse and working, so I spent a lot of time with my nana and my papa. And now I look at their situation, and I'm a papa. I'm a grandfather. I have a grandson who is getting to be very articulate. He's almost 3 years old. He's starting to form sentences together and tell you what he wants and what he doesn't want and what he wants to do, and what he's interested in, and he's starting to sing songs, and it's adorable. I mean, just adorable. And I'm becoming the papa. It's interesting to look at the time frame and the spectrum of what it was like as a young boy growing up around them. And then we moved away. When we came to South Carolina, it was because my mom had met a guy, and he had family that was here, and her job could transfer. She was a nurse at the time, and we moved here so that he could be closer to his daughter and closer to his mother and his brother and his sister and all that family. And sort of the consolation was, if we move, then I still need to go visit my family. So we spent a lot of time on the road going back to Georgia to visit family. But I remember coming to school for the first time and not really fitting in with anybody. The first conversations I think I had with kids on a regular basis was, hey, what does your mom and daddy do? Well, my mom and daddy were divorced. I didn't really know how to answer that question. I knew my mom was a nurse. I really didn't know what my stepdad did at the time when we first moved here. And the other question was, you like Clemson or Carolina? Well, back then I didn't know what a Clemson was. I thought they were, something was wrong with their speech, because I was like, what is a what? What did you say? Now you got to imagine, this is before cable TV. I mean, I think cable TV was coming out right around this time. And my stepdad was big time into watching sports. And I became a sports fan once we moved here. Once we got here, he had a sister with 2 boys that were around my age. One was older and one was younger, Joey and Patrick. And I sort of got lumped into hanging out with them because it was just seen that I was, at the time, I was very introverted. I was very shy. I was very quiet. And it just worked out to where, you know, my stepdad could hang out with his sister and their family, and let the boys just play together. And we did. We played a lot. We bonded. And it sort of helped me develop my character growing up, because I was able to be forced to be with these people who I wasn't really like, and yet we got along. They introduced me to watching football and basketball and wrestling, and we wrestled a lot. I called them my cousin. You know, we were married into the family, but still, they were technically my cousins. So I'd go over and hang out with my cousins, and they had a trampoline, and we would pretend that we were wrestlers, and we would wrestle on the trampoline, and we would almost hurt each other to the point that we broke bones, but we would always pull back just before somebody snapped something. I think mainly because we were afraid we'd get yelled at by our parents. But we were violent, and we were destructive as kids, and we did a lot of things we shouldn't have. And we sort of helped raise each other during that time. And also during that time at school, it just so happens that I started to make friends with kids who had also moved to the area, because I realized that, like me, these other kids were moving to the area and didn't know anybody, and they felt sort of on the outside. And I thought, what if I could be their friend? What if I went out of my way to go up to them and say, hey, how are you? Where are you from? Oh, really? What's that like? I've never been there. And sort of treat them as a friend since day one and see what happens from there. And that's where I met my good friend Rodney Aspiris. I've talked about him before. First day of school, he comes up and slaps me on the arm and goes, "Tag, you're it," and runs off. And I was like, wait, what? And I chased after him, and Rodney had a sense of play. And that was how Rodney sort of found his way in the beginning when he moved here. And we bonded over playing together. We played together a lot. Rodney played kickball, Rodney played wiffle ball, you know, whatever you got going on. If there was a football game going on, he wanted to play. If there was a basketball game going on, he wanted to play. Rodney was in. And I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that Rodney had an older brother named Jay, and Jay was athletic. Jay wanted to play. And, you know, we bonded. I later met my friend Greg. Greg and I met in 9th grade. We actually got thrust into a couple of classes together. In one class in particular, there was a girl that I was a little sweet on, and he sat next to her, and instantly she was wooed, and I thought, you son of a bitch. And I was like, he is my mortal enemy now. And then they sat us next to each other, and then I realized, oh wait, we have a lot more in common than I thought, mainly Guns N' Roses. We're sitting back there kind of discussing something, and I hear him humming Guns N' Roses lyrics, and at the time, music was not as available as it is today. You couldn't just download anything. You had to actually go somewhere and purchase something, and we bonded over Guns N' Roses, weirdly enough. But my point is I made that friend while I was in school in 9th grade. And I'm 44 now. I'm getting ready to turn 45. I also met my good friend Josh Treadaway. I met him in 8th grade? Or no, 10th grade, because he's a year behind me. I met him in 10th grade, and we sort of had classes together because he was really smart, and just so happens we had the same classes. That's sort of a fancy way of saying that I wasn't that smart. But no, we had electives together. I think we had like French 1 and French 2 together, and then we just sort of ended up in some similar classes, and we bonded right away. And it just sort of happened that I met these guys then. And I've continued to stay friends with them. And I didn't meet, I have two friends named Josh. There's another Josh in here named Josh West. I met Josh's brother, Gabriel, in that same French class that I met Josh Treadaway. And Gabriel is interesting because my name is Joshua Gabriel. So I had a friend named Josh and a friend named Gabriel, and I thought, well, that's just kind of weird and coincidental. I didn't realize that it was a popular name, but anywho, I became friends with these guys, and it was great. And I met Josh West, I want to say either my senior year or the year right after high school. But these guys I bonded with. Well, as life turns out, I ended up meeting a girl. We got married, and I went in the Marine Corps. We had a kid, not necessarily in that order, if you know what I mean. And I went to California. And when I came home, all my friends had moved away. They had moved on to start their lives, and it took them in different directions. And when I ended up back in my little hometown after being divorced with two kids, I had to start over. And I realized that all of my time and my effort were given to my kids. And it was a full-time job just to make sure that they weren't dead, and to make sure I had them picked up everywhere and delivered everywhere and fed and clothed and clean and all that other stuff. And somehow keep myself alive in the process. And I was learning what it was like to be a parent. And I had them involved in all sorts of activities with Cub Scouts and football and soccer and tennis. And, you know, I got a lot of help from my mom and from my brother. And, you know, it sort of, you know that saying, it takes a village? Well, it took a village to help me raise my kids. Well, the weird thing is during that time, I didn't make any real friends. I made people that were people I knew. I met a guy named David, and he and I bonded, but David and I were both on sort of destructive paths in different directions, and I lost David for a while. David got a little over involved with extracurricular fun things, and David had to move back home to help take care of his mom and his dad. In the process, sort of an interesting coincidence, but it resulted in him moving away. And I was left again with no real friends. Now, I met my wife during that time, and my wife had kind of gone a similar path. She had moved here from Georgia. She was married at the time with a son, and they got divorced, and then she had to start over. And she will admit that she struggled to find some real friends. And she met a couple, and some worked out, some didn't. But here in the last, I don't know how many years, 4 years or so, she's met some really great friends. She would probably say in the last 2 or 3 years. But anyway, she's met some really great friends. And this weekend, they're gone together to spend some time because one of them has to move away. And it's interesting being an older adult, being a grandparent, and realizing, oh wait, I've just now made some really good friends, and they're gone. One of them's moving away, and I don't want them to move away, but they have to live their life. And it doesn't mean that that person's gone forever. It means that you know, we're going to have to travel to visit, and they're going to have to travel to visit, and they're going to travel and visit together, and probably take trips together. But in life, you sort of sometimes have to follow where your heart is. And if your heart leads you in a direction that you need to go, then you go that way. So, I said all that to say this. Today is Saturday, and I'm getting my grandson today, just me and him. And luckily, it's at a time where he is pretty easy to deal with. He's not quite to where he's potty trained, which will be nice. It'll be nice once he gets to that point. But he's at the part where he can communicate, and he's starting to learn to enjoy conversation a little bit. And when you tell him, hey, look at this, he's paying attention and he looks at it and he's, amazed. Because there's a big world out there. And I remember my grandparents showing me a lot of that world, even though it was considered in a small local circle of their lives, be it the farm or their house or walking up the road to where my grandmother's sister lived so I could play with my second cousin. It's important to walk with them through life and show them things and talk to them and communicate. And I notice a lot of people nowadays are so tied into their devices. I have grown men that I work with who can't seem to take their face out of their phone long enough to have a conversation with a customer. It's a generational thing, I'm sure, but I wonder if I had to go to school now as a kid from a different area and I walked into school the first day, I don't know that I would have anybody come up to me and say, hey man, what's your mom and dad do for a living? You like Clemson or Carolina? I wouldn't know what would happen. I mean, honestly, there would probably be no conversation. We developed those skills when we were younger because we didn't have any other options, because there was nothing more entertaining. Now, there's an endless world of entertainment at our fingertips. There's literally things you can watch at any time to keep you busy. There's games you can play, there's social media, you can be friends with people around the world, or as I call it, internet friends with people around the world, and never really know them, never really have any contact with them. This is sort of the process or the conversation that I hear when I hear about depression and I hear about people taking their own life and how people feel disconnected. Even though we're supposed to be more connected than ever before, people feel disconnected and they don't feel like they can bond with one another. And it's important, I think, to get yourself out of your comfort zone and to get involved and to extend a hand and say, hey, I like you, I want to be part of your life. Let's hang out together, let's do something. And I've failed on that in my life. I've failed as an adult. My friends have moved away still, and I have failed as an adult to continue to voice that part of me and to say, hey, I need a friend, and it'd be nice to be your friend. And let's have a community, let's have a conversation, let's hang out, let's do something. And I've tried to do that with a few people, and it's interesting because the people that I come into contact with the most is the people that I work with, and oftentimes we have different positions and it's not okay for us to hang out, or it's a thing of different schedules because one of us works third shift and the other one works first shift, and it just makes hanging out harder. And it doesn't mean that it has to be undoable. Like if one of my friends that I grew up with were to move here and they worked third shift, we'd figure out a way. I heard this said in church one time. Our pastor said, listen, it doesn't matter how busy you are in life. If there's something you really want to do, you'll make time for it. And he's right. He talks about how busy he is, and he says, but I'll tell you, one of my weaknesses is playing golf. If someone says, hey, you want to play golf? I'll figure out how to work it into my schedule so that I can play golf that day. And it's like that with anything in life, anything that you're passionate about. My wife decided at an older age that she was going to join the gym, and she needed to take a priority for herself because she didn't want to be a decrepit old lady. I remember her having that conversation and saying, I want to be the best version of me I can be. And to do that, I feel like I need to be in the gym. And I would be honest to say that I think that she is probably the best physical version of herself and probably the best mental version of herself right now than ever before. And the mental part of it may have a lot to do with the community that's grown from going to the gym. These girls that she's become friends with, these women that she's become friends with, she met at the gym. And they're doing something together, and they have a like mind. And they're focused on the same sorts of goals. It's, I've lived my life, I've raised kids. I I need to get control of me because I want to live the best possible life I can live for the rest of this journey. This meat vehicle that I have, I want it to be in great shape so that I can wear the clothes I want to wear, so I can go physically do the things I want to do. And, I used to joke about the fact that my wife enjoyed going on Facebook and looking at people that she went to school with and going, oh my God, I can't believe I went to school with her. She looks like she could be my grandmother. And it's sort of a comparison conversation, which we talked about that before. But it's also sort of a way of taking pride in the fact that, look at all the work I've done and I'm proud of me. And she's right. I'm proud of her. I mean, it takes a tremendous effort to do something over doing nothing. A comedian one time says, listen, it's 100% easier to do nothing over something. So thank you all for coming out tonight. And what was it, Tom Segura on his special, he's like, he had a comedy special called Disgraceful. It's on Netflix. Where he comes out and he says, thank you all for being here. Thank you. Listen, it's great to be here, but I'd really like to be at home. And I'm sure you would too. We'd all like to be at home. It's great at home. We got great stuff at home. We got internet and, we can sit in our pajamas and eat whatever we want because it's right there. And we can go to the restroom because it's right there. And, the conveniences of our life make it easier for us not to leave our life, our circle, our comfort zone. But if you don't leave your comfort zone and you just involve yourself with social media and internet friendships, are you getting what you need? Are you getting that conversation? Are you getting that kindred spirit? Are you getting that closeness? Me and my cousins, quote unquote cousins, grew up spending a lot of time together. And now when I see them, I remember all the times that we spent together. And because of that physical time and those conversations that we had and the fun that we had and the not so fun times, all of that formed a relationship with us so that it's very familiar when we come into contact again. My mom's not married to that guy anymore, and we've lived our lives in different directions, but we still come together for family that's connected, and whenever something happens, we're always in the same room. And they're always the people I gravitate to, because they're the people that I had conversations with and spent so much time with growing up. So, I talked last episode about Brody Stevens, or was it last episode or the one before? It might be the one before. About Brody Stevens passing away, about him taking his own life. And this past week I listened to Bert Kreischer's podcast he did with Greg Fitzsimmons and Allison Rosen, and it's a good one. It's 3 hours long. Just skip, if you want to skip past the reads, they do him and his wife do 20 minutes of reads on the Bertcast. But in there, they talk about Brody and how Brody was always so jovial and friendly, and they enjoyed bumping into him in public, and they enjoyed the time they spent together. And he was sort of a comics comic. Whenever the comics would go out to do comedy, if he was on stage, he made them giggle. And he was dealing with some personal issues and just didn't feel like he had any other options. And they talk about this on the podcast, and they give out, some 1-800 numbers for suicide. And I did that on that podcast, and I implore anybody that feels like they're disconnected, anybody who feels like they just can't seem to go on, please call somebody. Call somebody, make a communication, make a contact, make an effort, because other people will make an effort for you. Even people that you don't think would, they'll make an effort for you. And maybe the thing is that you got to unplug from the internet for a while and plug into real life. Maybe you need to walk up to somebody and say, hey, I'm feeling kind of lonely. I need to hang out with you. Can we hang out? You'd be amazed at how much that conversation will change your life and theirs. So, just like Casey Neistat said, Action over intent. You can intend to do a lot of things, but until you take action, does it really matter? So, my little camera light is blinking on me, so I'm going to end this right now. I got up at 4:30 this morning because I couldn't sleep, and because my wife's not here, I can just turn everything on and do this thing. But also I wanted to do it because, well, my grandson will be here soon, and we get to hang out, and it's going to be fun. So, y'all take care. If you don't hear it anywhere else, I love you. I care about you. And, we need each other. Whether we realize it or not, we need each other. So, take a moment, call the people who are important to you, hang out with them, make an effort, drive to where they live, spend a weekend, whatever it takes. We're guaranteed nothing. That's it. Y'all take care, and we'll do this again soon. Bye.